It is 5:05, so we are going to get started. Warm welcome to everyone. I am Carissa Price. I have the honor of serving as the chair of the education committee for the Woodford Women's Foundation. The Woodford Women's Foundation is a 20-year-old organization. It's a women's collective giving circle that was founded by some philanthropic ladies 20 years ago to pool their money and use that to support our local nonprofit community. This is our sixth State of the Valley Forum, which we do as an annual event. And it started really as a way to inform our members to make educated philanthropic decisions so they can stay in touch with what's going on in the Valley and know best where the need is, so that when we vote annually, which we're about to do, and give out our grants, they would understand a deeper understanding of the Valley and its needs. This year, we're trying something different. We have gathered here to have a panel discussion and some Q&A with all of you at the end around solving the civility crisis. How do we deepen our connection with each other? How do we go back to where we used to be, where we were neighbors, we greeted each other? And I'm going to start the session with a very short story. This summer, I was shopping at Natural Grocers, and I pushed my cart in, and I put a watermelon in, and I was going around, and I had to move a gentleman's cart that was in the way. So I gently pushed it aside, and I said, "Hey, fellow watermelon man, I'm just going to move your cart over here." And I smiled, and I went on my way. That man tracked me down in Natural Grocers, who thanked me for speaking to him, for just a natural human interaction that I grew up in this valley. I went to school here. I graduated from Wood River. That is who I believe we are as a community. We're neighborly, we're kind, we speak civilly to each other. We greet each other on the trails to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And if there's a neighbor in need, we give. And so I wanted to have this forum with these wonderful panelists who will introduce themselves in a moment to talk about how do we get back to that precious thing in our community where we are neighborly to each other, where we can speak honestly and openly and civilly, even if we disagree. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can discuss the things that we disagree, I believe, in a civil way, and reconnect with who we are as a valley and a community. So that's our topic tonight. I want to thank everyone from the Woodford Women's Foundation who's here. I see lots of our members present. We have members on Zoom. I want to thank our panelists for volunteering their time to engage in this conversation, and I think to model what does civil discourse look like. So we have someone here from the Republican Party, and we have someone here from the Democratic Party, and we have someone here, many people here, who are nonpartisan by choice in their daily lives. I'm giving you a group. But the point of this is we don't have to agree on everything, but we're going to talk about everything and hopefully model the kind of behavior we believe that this community can have. So we don't see this as a one-off event. We're really hoping that this can kick off a whole year of reconnection, of civility, of civil discourse, and that we get back to a place when we're on the bike path and someone goes too fast or too close, you say, "Hey, neighbor, slow down there." Mark Davidson from the BCRD is here, and I'm sure he had some stories to tell about incivility on our paths. But I'm not going to put you on the spot quite yet, Mark. As I said before, we're here to model behavior, and so at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So I'd like to give some ground rules here for the Q&A and for the session in general. Be respectful, be kind, be brief. We don't have a lot of time together here tonight, so let's make the most of our time together and really model the behavior we want to see. So with that, I'm going to do the panel intros. As you introduce yourself, panelists, please answer the question, what does civility mean to you? And where do you see it breaking down today? And we'll start with you, Pam.
My name is Pam Morris. I am here. All right. Hi. My name is Pam Morris.
Not working.
Here. Is that one? There you go.
Yeah.
Press the button. My name is Pam Morris. I'm the publisher of the Idaho Mountain Express. I've been with the newspaper for just about as long as it's existed here. We turned 50 years old last year. And I'm a third generation Idahoan. I grew up in Southeast Idaho. And your question, what is civility?
Yeah, what does civility mean to you, and where do you see it breaking down?
Civility is fine and diplomatic interactions between and amongst every day is up there. And I keep telling you, I'll get it. I see it breaking down. I've seen it break down over a number of years. I saw it, and I really became concerned in 1996. And I'm going to be speaking a lot from the communication side of this. When this is a long thing to remember, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act went into effect, and that lifted all liability from comments on the internet. It did not make the platforms responsible. As a newspaper, we are responsible for every single word that is printed in a newspaper. We are legally liable, but the platforms like Instagram, Facebook have absolutely no legal liability. That flows to the individuals who comment there, and we know what's happened with that. We know that incivility is free. So that's where I say all passes by.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
I'll turn the microphone up. The volume sounds real subdued, unless I'm losing my ear.
Project. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Michelle Stenden. I was in the Idaho Senate for 13 years and was the minority leader in the Senate during that period. And for those of you that don't know, it's the minority party. I started my political experience in Idaho, though, about in 1994, so it's over 30 years ago. And of course, over that period of time, we all have seen quite a change in politics. There's a lot of violence, a lot of changes. We can think of any number of things that have happened in the last 30 years that for no fault of any single person has altered all of us and how we manage our lives and how we deal with politics. But the devolution that I've seen within the body, within the legislature, has been more, and probably in the public too, has been a lack of manners, courtesies, where you have politics instead of policy being forefront, and shockingly for me, how hard it is for people to follow the Constitution and the rule of law, and so when you have that kind of continuous dissolving, it's really hard to be able to do what you were sent by the people to do. In addition to that, people are very reactionary these days. And then understandably, given what is happening in the world, we're very protective of our families and of our income and our professions and our race and religion and gender and geography. I mean, fill in the blanks. We want to make sure that we hold on to that. But we have to realize that no two people live exactly alike or have the same experiences. And so when you are expecting somebody to be exactly like you, you're always going to be unhappy about that. And it's going to foster discontent and distrust because no two people are ever exactly alike. And when you bring that to politics, my rights are more important than your rights, or if my rights have over the top of your rights, and you're trying as a politician to navigate that, then you're inherently going to have a lot of unhappy people who didn't get their way, because in the end, somebody is going to be left out when you're trying to manage that kind of environment. So anyway, I think that we have to realize as we go forward that politicians also, because of what we're seeing, have also stopped listening to the people. And we see that now. We see people rising up and not hearing from the people who actually elected them. And so the combination has meant for a hostile environment and feeling that you're not being heard and that you're not well represented.
Thank you, Michelle. Mark?
Thank you. It's hard to follow, Michelle. She has a pile of notes over here. Hi, Muffy.
No worries about it.
So I will say first off that it's pretty humbling to be on a panel talking about civility. I'm not an expert. I try to be nice. I think that what it means to me personally goes back quite a ways. And I think these are values that you learn at young ages, or ideally you would. And if you don't, you hopefully learn it somewhere along the way. I was taught to live by the golden rule. and that's kind of how I try to live. It's a little hard to be sitting up here. My neighbors directly across the street just showed up, and so they're gonna have to they're gonna be able to ground truth everything I say again.
Isn't that the beauty of this valley, Mike?
I don't know. I think I should leave. Go. I'm just throwing stuff in their yard, Alyssa. So that's, to me, it's pretty, I just try to keep it pretty simple. Like, how do I want to be treated? And can I treat somebody else like that? Even when I'm confronted with something that's very hard, or somebody's in my face, really angry, which has happened. Not just in this job, but in previous jobs. I used to work for the Nature Conservancy, and I worked all around the state, and I worked in some pretty rough, tumble landscapes around Idaho. I'll just tell this quick little story, but it's illustrative, I think, of what civility means and how to break it down. I see you, Jim.
I'm on it, but
When I was part of a land transaction in central Idaho, and in the Pacimori Valley, and it's 2 mountain ranges to the east of here. It's a very ranchy place. Maybe 35 people that live there, literally. It's a very small area. Very entrenched in traditional values, whatever that means. So I hear that a lot. So Nature Conservancy bought this ranch from this guy and his dad, and the brother was left with a little small portion of the ranch. He couldn't necessarily run the ranch with what he had left. That was what his brother and his dad did. But he put it on the Nature Conservancy. We were the ones who put him in that position, and I was out messing around with some gate that I couldn't close, something or other. And this guy comes ripping up to me on a 4-wheeler with a shovel in the back, and it's like, I've kind of seen the scene before, so I was just trying to maintain composure. It's like, the guys in the steer wrestling when they go jumping off the horse and they grab that steer in the wrestling. That's how he came off that 4-wheeler, right out. And with all that bluster and all that anger, ultimately what happened was we started to talk. We started to talk to each other. Not about his dad, not about his brother, or not about my organization or where I come from or who I represent. But we started talking about each other. We started to listen to each other. He still didn't like me. He still didn't like what we did. But we at least were able to talk, and it became a civil conversation and not a, you just took away my livelihood conversation. And I think that's how it plays out for me. And when I think about civility there, and I see this happen with other people. And when you see that, it's just, you try to just see that as much as possible. That's what it means to me.
thank you, Mark. Chanel?
Thanks. So I'm Chanel Dixon and also a former legislator. I might be the token Republican, which I was telling Mark, I often am on panels where people ask me to come, and I might be the only Republican on the panel, but I am happy to do that. So I served in the House from 2022 to 2024, and I saw some wildly uncivil things happen. And it wasn't always just from former legislators. Like if I were to break out some emails and show you some of the emails that I received from people, it was shocking to me. And voicemails that would be left on my office phone. And then when I ran for re-election, which I lost my primary, it was to somebody who I would say is the example of uncivil. But the things that people were saying to me and about me, it was just wild. And so I've experienced a lot of that incivility. But I think, going back to what Pam said, I think we really started to see a downward spiral with social media, because people can hide behind their keyboard and they can say whatever they want. And then I feel like now they're so brazen, right, that people say those things out loud in conversation, where it used to just be behind the keyboard, but it's given people, I don't know, some weird sense of being able to, well, I can just say whatever I want. Whereas like when I was growing up, I was also taught, to be nice and kind and have conversations and to be curious and get to know people. And many of my best friends we don't agree on everything, but we have a relationship and we've developed that. We can talk about things without it breaking down into uncivil conversations, I guess. One of the other things that I was thinking about, just in my experience with the legislature, and I still do a lot in my community. I guess I entered thinking I wanted to be a statesman, and I wanted, when I thought about serving in the legislature, it was about being a public servant, being a servant leader. That was kind of how I described myself and what I strove to be. And there weren't a lot of people, I guess, that kind of had that same mindset as to why they were there. And I think that's a problem. And we see that in a lot of spaces. It's definitely not just in the Idaho State Legislature. We're seeing it all across the country. We see it just all over the place. But I am hopeful because there are people who are interested in building their communities and making sure that we maintain civility. So I am hopeful about it, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Redmond with the Flourish Foundation. For me, I love what you all said, so I want to try to build a little bit and not be redundant and repetitive. But for me, civility, it really begins from a recognition of acknowledging and honoring our shared humanity. And I'll spend just a moment and a minute to define what I mean by that term, because I think it can mean a number of different things. But it's acknowledging and honoring our shared humanity, particularly in the face of discord, or disagreement, or conflict. And the understanding is that if we develop this authentic connection with another person's shared humanity, it's not foolproof, but it's very likely that qualities of respect and care will emerge if we move into that kind of relationship. And so what I mean by this term shared humanity, it's really the recognition that we can have that when we see particularly another human being, we start to, rather than distinguish ourselves from them, we start to look at what do we have in common. And the obvious would be we're both human beings. We're incorporated in a body. We have a mind. But then if we get into a more intimate space of like, oh, here's another human being who experiences an entire range of emotions, who has at some point in their life probably experienced intense sadness because of loss, has experienced fear or anxiety because they've felt threatened at one time or another, has maybe experienced intense anger at times because they felt blocked or thwarted in trying to reach a goal. But most importantly, below this kind of emotional space is going into what we could say is a more existential space of, and fundamentally, here's another human being who cares to be happy, who cares to be well. And regardless of their orientation of the world, we can almost be 100% sure that here's another human being who cares not to suffer. And I think once we open up to that empathically and begin to feel with another person, it shifts the conversation dramatically. When we're looking, and this is, I think, to your point about the internet and what Pam was also mentioning, is it's so easy to be confrontational and say things, of course, that we would never say to a person in their face unless we've been trained to do this. I think that's a really wonderful point, that the more we essentially are practicing how to do this, the more comfortable we get in doing it. And I think that's what we're seeing as it starts to creep more and more into the public discourse. But if we fundamentally can come back to that place, I think there's a real opportunity for us. And where I see that breaking down is actually in childhood. Children are naturally born with that quality. And then I would say it's very much from my perspective, a cultural issue where we're in a very consumer-based, kind of individualistic society where collaboration is not necessarily praised, but we're taught at a very young age to be suspicious of other people or what people are going to maybe harm us or get in our way, or we start to question other people's motives. And for good reason, there's another element of our existence to be safe as well. But unless we continue to nurture this ability to attend closely to other people, largely through empathy, like any other skill, it's like a muscle, it will atrophy. And if we start to move in the other direction, and I think inadvertently through social media, I'd say it's the largest social experiment in which none of us have given our informed consent for it. It's been given to us, but we're starting to see the dramatic implications that are coming out. But inadvertently through mass media and other forces around us, I think we're losing that capacity to empathically connect with other people. And we're getting more and more conditioned to be suspicious, fearful, mistrusting of the other. So I think it really has to do with what we attend to. And the more we attend to something, it will grow. And so I think it really starts in childhood, actually. And so it's a breakdown of our cultural values and really what we value.
Thanks so much, Brian. Elle?
Again, hard to follow, but I'll do my best. Hello, everyone. My name is Elle Davis. I'm from River High School. And I was raised in this valley primarily since I was 7. And I've seen a lot of discourse. My mom is a politician. So again, I've seen a lot of the heartache and everything that's come from everyone. And what I've noticed is, again, how people take different problems. And instead of taking the problem and going at it as this is us versus the problem, they make it personal. And this is when it leads to a lot of incivility, I believe. And I think in many different situations, this is something that we need to change. It's not us versus each other, it's us versus the problem. And it is so easy to talk to each other with respect and genuine understanding that, again, we are all humans and we have connections. And I think that civility is being lost in many different places. As a high school student, I can say many discussions and value of conversation has been lost. Everything is informal. We come to school and we just are told, this is what we're here for, this is what we need to do. The genuine curiosity and like personal questions are lost. And we lose that human contact. The other day I was at Danes and I was in line, and it was quite a long line. And it was great because I had a human interaction that I hadn't had in so long. I was in line and there was this grandfather that came up behind me and he started cracking jokes left and right. And his granddaughter was there and she was like super embarrassed. But I was so happy that he told me like the funniest jokes. And I was so happy that I could have this one-on-one conversation and this connection. And it brought a smile on my face for the rest of the night. And I think this is something that as a valley we used to see so commonly, and we don't see that as much anymore. Partly this can also be because our grocery stores, Albertsons, they changed to, self-checkout. So we have a lot less human interaction, and I think this is something very large that we're seeing everywhere. And I think at the heart, we all really do desire that human connection and that curiosity and that genuine wonder and connection of how we are as a community and how we can further that. So I think that's something that we very commonly see. And in the high school, touching on the social media, it's true. We're so used to talking over social media that it's hard to even have conversations sometimes with people without a phone being involved or something over the internet, which, yeah, some things over the internet are very fun to talk about. And if you've heard or had a conversation with someone from our age, you've probably heard some confusing words that you don't understand. And my mom likes to talk about a lot because we kind of curated our own language. But we also need for teenagers, just at this perspective, have conversations without them and interactions without them. And I think that's something that, at least for the teenagers in our valley, that's what we really are seeing to push past.
Thanks, Elle.
I'm Santi Rico. I'm a senior at Woodward High School, and I like to build up upon a little bit of like what's been said already from like this whole concept of like this kind of apathy for our fellow human being beginning in like childhood from the perspective of someone recently coming out of childhood. Um, I don't know. I spent the first half of my life growing up in LA, Los Angeles, and I spent the second half of my life here. So I've gotten a whole range of people. I've met from city people, country people, and I think the idea that social media and just the internet in general kind of it almost like it's very easy to not. It's already been said, but it's very easy to not like see this as like a fellow human being. And then, and you're also like behind a screen, you can say whatever you want. And I think this kind of also does carry over into real life. And this kind of, I think we almost humanize each other in ways where it's like, I think either we get too caught up in our own lives or, there's a variety of factors. And I don't know, I think that, well, it's not good. A lot's already been said, so I don't know much I can say about it.
That's good, it's a good answer.
Yeah. But from like a high school concept, from a high school perspective, I think high schoolers in general, we kind of get caught up in like a lot of superficial concepts. And I think chasing whatever you define as a superficial concept, like money, if that's one to you, or fame or anything like that. And I think we can kind of put ourselves above other people, like and not the good way, in the bad way. And I don't know. I think it is a cultural problem, and I think it's many layers to it, from childhood all the way up to adulthood, and like just the societies that are there. And I think it starts here. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sandy. And I hope you can see through these introductions why we chose the panelists that we have here, because they have a different perspective, but we're all tied to the same community, and we're all experiencing very similar things. In terms of experience, so I had an exercise I was going to have us do, which is why you're all wearing 2 name tags. But in the essence of time, I'm actually going to put that to the end. But I want you to think about it. So each of you has a name tag, hopefully, with your first name. And then the second one, the request was, what are your favorite activities here in the Valley? And the exercise at the end is to find one other person that you don't know before you came here with the same word or similar, right? Ski, hike, bike, because it's back to we have far more in common than we do have difference. And can we recognize that humanity for people begin to talk about here in each other to say, hey, it doesn't matter how you vote or if you vote, we both love to ski, or we both love to hike, or we both love to go to church. There's a variety of things that we do in common that can bring us together and reestablish that connection. So we're going to come back to that exercise, but we're going to keep here with the panel. And that was the purpose of that second name tag. So diving in, for each of the panelists, and there's no particular order here, so whoever wants to go first, from your vantage point, what do you see as the root causes of instability? Ryan, you touched a little bit on this, in our community or state.
I'll go. Just to get this out. You mentioned the Wood River Trail. That's an interesting concept in our community because it spans the entire community. You can go from Balmoral Apartments and you can ride or walk or hike or ski past multi-million-dollar homes. You see every component of our community on that course of that path. And it's like a lot of public spaces. The nice thing about the path is it's constrained. It's only so big. And we all want to get on it at certain times. Now, there are certain times of the day, like in July at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll be all alone. But the hot topic in our community for a while, does anybody want to guess what I'm about to say? Yes, e-bikes. And it's an interesting question because it touches on a lot of the things we're talking about. I was going to try to avoid this topic, but what the heck. What I have found in going to different public meetings up and down the valley, because everybody's setting, like all the cities are trying to set rules around the bike path. I shouldn't say it's the Woodriver Trail, it's not just for bikes. And that's the other thing I want everybody to remember. It's the Woodriver Trail, not the bike path. And I said recently at a public meeting that it's one of our most democratic spaces. And I actually got a letter saying, well, Davidson doesn't understand what this thing's about. Maybe I don't. But for me, it is a democratic space. Like, you can go to Northridge and after work, what do you see? You see a pile of people out with dogs, walking their dogs, going for runs, whatever. You go a little bit south by Balmoral, what do you see at around 6:30, 7, 8 o'clock? You see the paseo, which in Latin American countries, that's a thing. Everybody goes out after dinner or before dinner, they go for a walk with the family. And you have these two activities happen, but then you get, I'm going to pick on a certain category person for a second. You might get people like around my age or a little older that like get all their Lycra out, they get their bike ways as much as this piece of paper right here, and they start ripping down the path and by God, get out of their way. They can go 45, but if they see one of these two down here on an e-bike, they're going to vilify these two kids and everybody else at that age for being on an e-bike. Now, we can argue the specifics of types and throttles and all that. I get all that. That all needs to have some constraints around it. And there's a lot to this conversation. But what it has shown me over the past 5 years that I've been in my job at Plain County Rec District is that we want to put people in categories so we can then point to that's the problem. And if that's the problem, all we need to do is solve for that. If we can get those dang kids off their e-bikes, terrorizing everybody, solve. Unfortunately, the kids are actually the nicest ones on the path. We actually saw this like with our own eyes in a couple of different instances. We set up a series of tents along the path over the month of August, a little bit into September. And we would stop people and talk to them. And when we stopped and talked to the kids, I think the tent was up around Warm Springs, somewhere in that area. And the story I heard was that they asked the two teenagers, well, what's been your experience in the bike path or on the Woodriver Trail? Sorry, they said, well, we get a lot of adults yelling at us through their cars. They can slow down and yell at them. That's what they experience. And they're like, we're trying to follow the rules, but we're getting vilified by, and they pointed at the adults, you guys. And I'm going to point at you guys. I don't know, maybe you guys aren't like that. Maybe we're all civil and we're all great. But I think it's an important, an important experiment in our community, that place. Because the challenge is not going to be solved by me or by the city council of Haley or Ketchum or whomever. It's going to be solved by us. We have to solve that problem. We have to be civil to each other. We have to work together to solve it. There you go.
Well done. Yeah.
Can that be the last Woodriver Trail question?
I have a solution for you,
Great.
for everyone. It's the simple words, on your left. Problem solved.
Along that vein, when I was a kid and I got my first bicycle, the owner of the bike store took great pains to make sure that I, A, knew how to ride it, knew how to signal to turn left, knew how to signal to turn right, know that I needed to stop at stop signs, know that I needed what side of the road I needed to ride on with traffic. And honestly, that education, I think when I was probably in the first or second grade, has stayed with me my entire life. So I come down to education, plus maybe a little enforcement thrown in. But going down as far as, you know, the root causes, every time I hear the word root, I think of a big stew, a big root stew. And this thing is simmering, and some of the roots have turned a little sour. From where I sit, and I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one on this panel, what I see is a real pushback that is a historical pushback that started in the 1960s with the Vietnam War. We are now living without the World War II generation, which is probably one of the most civil generations that ever walked, at least in this country. And so what I'm seeing now, you know, we don't remember. We are losing our historical memory of what happened during the wars that led up to the Civil War and beyond. We have forgotten about the Civil Rights Act. We have seen over the last 40 years the results of the women's movement, ladies. We've seen an arc of social progress. And what we're seeing right now is the pendulum swinging back really hard. And it's swinging back really hard because we have an innate fear of change, because change is different and we don't know how to handle it. I myself am probably seeing that fear right now and trying to deal with it with the advent of artificial intelligence. I don't know if how many of you, and I now, Carissa, have gone up to see and to test the bounds and the capabilities of artificial intelligence. It's really quite stunning, and I'm stunned. I will leave it at that. I won't talk about that. But in our valley, we have gone from a valley when I came here, that when you're on a dirt road going to Mackey and somebody's coming the other way, you happily backed up if the road was too narrow. The other thing you did was you gave the Idaho wave. You got your steering wheel up here and you're going by, and you do this when somebody else comes by, and they do that too, because both of you know that when your tire goes flat, that the two of you are going to be helping each other change that tire. That's gone away. And I see it once in a while. But I asked a woman who came to work for us, who had come, she'd either come from LA or New York, I don't remember at this point. And I said, what do you think when you see somebody do the wave? And she said, I think they're gonna mud me and I need to get away as fast as possible. And so those are two diametrically opposed things. I miss the wave. I do the wave, but I don't want to threaten anybody. I don't want them to think I'm gonna mud them. In the valley, we're seeing, as well as a disappearance of that kind of historical civility, we're seeing clashes for resources, and we're seeing economic inequality. I say all the time that we are ground zero as an example of economic inequality. You cannot take a look and understand and see the kind of housing that we have here, the kind of house I live in, which is an ordinary house, and a $17 million estate, gated. I mean, it's stunning. We know, I know all of you know what our problems are, but there is an underlying problem. And the underlying problem is that there was a wonderful book that described this. The book was called Getting to Yes, that I read a long time ago when I was trying to understand why I wasn't getting further than I was getting in some negotiations I was involved in. And so I read this book hoping to find the key to solving problems and the key to finding middle ground. And I read the whole thing and I absorbed it. But in the very last chapter, they really let the hammer down and they said, you cannot negotiate with someone who will not negotiate and refuses to move off from wherever they are, refuses to discuss on and on. So I think we've got a big job on our hands regaining civility, both in the valley, but nationally and potentially globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for that. I'm going to move on to the second question because it's a good segue that you provided there, Pam. So, Michelle, I'm going to start with you because we discussed in our prep for this panel a story which I am eager for you to share. Share a time you witnessed disagreement handled well. What made it work?
Well, I can think of a couple of things. One, I'll get off script on politics because it was a recent thing that we negotiated, and Mark knows all about it. We've been negotiating the water rights and the uses on Basin 37, which is our basin. And it is all the way from Galena Summit, and it goes down to the Snake River Rim. And it's one of the most complicated basins of anywhere in the state. It's got a large aquifer under it. It has a lot of tributaries to it. There's just so much science that in order to understand how it flows and what's been detrimental and how we are abusing it as far as all of the ag sector and uses up here, who have the rights and how, who's sharing and who isn't sharing. I mean, it goes on and on. There's nothing more complicated than water law. And so it took a couple of years because it finally came to a head that the ground users and the surface users were just a juggernaut. And it wasn't going to work if the two of them were just going to sit at a table trying to negotiate. Which, to Mark's point, if you're sitting there and it's your livelihood and you're sitting at the table and somebody's taking a precious resource away from you that is detrimentally going to impact your family, you're not going to come in without your guns blazing. Just not going to happen. And so so it finally became apparent that the Department of Water Resources had to arbitrate because they were the gatekeepers and they knew the law. And in the end, they were going to have to litigate if this wasn't going to work. Because the law says that the first in right is first in time, and that's just the way it goes. And it may not, and technically, mining is the #1 highest ranking water right in the whole state because we were a mining state to begin with. But really, it's come down to how we can manage it for industry and for our consumption with the municipalities and for primarily for agriculture, which is our #1 economic driver. Having watched so many years the legislature not be able to come to yes and sit there and fight and throw money at it and not really negotiate it because everybody's trying to represent their constituencies and their personal interests. I watched these people when they could be handled appropriately and sit in the room and really listen to each other and take every little piece. It is a laborious, rigorous process on purpose. And they came to an agreement. And ironically, as lopsided as some things are in the state, our water laws are better than probably so much of the West. We've adjudicated 80% of our watersheds. We have a water bank and we have a water board. And we are the only ones that have managed in 2 different agreements over half of our watershed, which is mostly the Snake River Rim and all the tributaries to it, to be able to have all the water use could come to agreement. But it was them with some guidance who showed us how to do it. We couldn't do it. We couldn't seem to get it done in the political arena. And we managed to watch them do it and set the example. So this is a case of where the public and people out there and industry and families and who all had to do it because it was going to be a personal impact. And so that is a really good lesson for us. But to continue from where we came from, if I might just really quickly, is in the Idaho Senate. I will talk about the Senate because we always tease the House is a crazy place. And it's double members.
Let's talk about
And
that.
she can talk about it because I don't know how to navigate okay. But anyway, so we always managed respectful decorum. It was absolutely adamantly, I don't care who you are, I don't care what's going on. Both the House and the Senate have strict floor and committee rules. When you speak, and I'm only giving the lay of the land because a lot of people don't understand this works. It looks like complete chaos from an outsider. You are forced to go through a chairperson or through the president of the Senate or the Speaker of the House before you can even talk. And part of the reason why it's so laborious to ask permission all the time to talk, before you can say, may I speak to the senator from here? And you have to ask the president permission. Or may I make a comment to the person at the podium who's the public? And you have to ask permission from the chair, is because it dissolves the ability for people to heighten their anger and escalate, because it slows it down and it makes you think and it makes you ask permission. And if you're coming from a place of anger, you are not allowed to speak. It's just not allowed. And so along with that is you're never allowed to use extraordinary words. And extraordinary words are swear words, obviously, but anything that defames anybody's character, anything where you're criticizing something that is beyond the issue you're talking about. It was really strong in the Senate that you debate the issue and not the person. And if you did, you go at ease, you tell them, you pull them aside quietly, which is a little bit of shaming because the whole Senate's watching, and you're like, if you can't speak civilly, you're not speaking. And anybody on the floor, not just leadership, could make that happen. If somebody got off their leash, you made them adjourn and say, till you can be civil, you're not speaking. And so I think that is a really good set of ground rules about how it is to manage, and how we did manage. And unfortunately, some of that is dissolving. I just was speaking to Senator Taylor a couple of days ago, and I said, how is it working on the Senate floor? And he said, well, the leadership is not strong enough to manage some of its more aggressive members, because they're getting more and more aggressive and less following decorum and rules of the body. And so it is now the older members, like the president of the Senate was the Speaker of the House, and he's been there for 30-something years. He knows how it works. And since he's trying to manage the floor, he quiets them down because the leadership won't even still. So at some point, somebody's still holding that thread of making sure that people behave. And I really worry that at some point, it's just not going to be there anymore. And there's going to be no strict decorum, because it really matters. It looks kind of archaic when you're watching it, but it really matters. But having said that, while I was there, there were only 6 Democrats and 29 Republicans. So they could run over the top of you for any vote, anything we want to do, because they just have the numbers. But in our time, and what we need to do is we make sure that we hold that quorum. I'm ever respectful to the leadership. They are ever respectful back. They communicate well. We make sure that people are heard. I mean, each one of us are elected by the same number of people from our districts. If you silence them, you silence everybody they represent, and that's not okay. So we really worked hard for that. Some of my best friends are the legislators that and from the Republican Party, who I really adore. And we worked hard to keep that civility. And they turned out to be some of the best members of the National Institute on Civil Discourse. And it's Republican Democrats you have to be a sitting legislator, and you know that more before we speak to it. But from all across the country, and they are determined to bring people from opposing views together, so that they can have a discussion about how you be civil while disagreeing. And I think these types of things need to be fostered more and more. Thank you.
I'll just follow up shortly and then move on. One of the things I put on my list in looking at what do we need to do is to return Robert's Rules of Order to our city council meetings. We have seen them. We have seen a real descent into lack of control of those meetings, and we have seen people able to stand up in public and vilify the very public servants that the majority of people elected. It's very discouraging. It doesn't have to happen. I mean, we've always been a rowdy valley. We have never seen anything that we don't want to argue about. I've seen it up to the point where during one piece of politics, there was a near fist fight in one of the aisles. But we very quickly closed that down with a gavel and said, this is not happening. You sit down. You are out of order. And that can be done, but people need to be trained and they need to exercise those Robert's rules.
Great, Elle, want to add to this?
Yes, sorry, I just think that this conversation on this topic is something I want to bring up. I had a personal disagreement in place and actually went to someone in the crowd. She told me a very, very good story about Jane Goodall. I think it's very important for all of us to hear. And it's about how to handle these discords. And for Jane Goodall, I was in a situation of, I think a lot of times what we see today in disagreements, people come in very accusatory tones. People come and then the other person is going to be very defensive. And when you're talking and discussing or disagreeing in these ways, you're not going to get across to anyone and the other person's going to feel attacked or the other person's going to feel misheard. But when coming from a humanitarian standpoint or just from a personal standpoint, and like what the story was of Jane Goodall, is she met with these people who had I don't remember the exact story, but she met with these captors of chimpanzees, I think, and instead of looking at these people, it's like, how dare you do these to these animals? She took it and she said, I'm so sorry you have to witness this, and I'm so sorry that you have to go through that, because that must be so hard to witness as a human who has feelings. And in doing this and in talking to one another in a way through human connection, one, you're able to come to such a better conclusion and actually come together for the better and actually make an answer. And also people are heard and they leave actually productive and hurt and making accomplishments. And I just think that story is like so precious and what I try to incorporate into my everyday life and such an inspiration.
I love that, Elle. Does anyone else want to address or share a time you witnessed disagreement handled well and what made it work? Janelle? Sandy, sorry, you've got the mic.
I'd like to back up the point about the city council meetings. I was at the most recent city council meeting. I'm not sure if anyone else here was, but a member of the public got up to the podium when it was his turn to talk, and he spoke his mind. And yeah, he threw, instead of like, I'm still confused about what his point actually was, because he threw like a lot of like personal like accusations towards the city council and like and just like the entire board in general. And he ended his little rant by saying, oh, and by the way, I didn't vote for any of you. So I think that just kind of adds to the point where it's like he came in with an argument about, and the meeting was actually about the bike paths, by the way. And he kind of went in with like, he had like an argument in mind, like a sound argument, but the way he like conveyed his points and like the other things he said, where it's kind of the only thing that people remembered was him just being angry and mean towards the city council.
Janelle?
So I just want to personalize this for a minute. One in 6 people have stopped talking to a family member over politics. 1 in 6 in our country. So it was right after my primary that I had lost, and Prop 1 was on the ballot that November, and I was in favor of Prop 1, and I got a text from a friend of ours, and he was asking me, and now that I think back, well, I realized pretty quickly, it was more of baiting me. But anyway, when he was first texting, I thought we were having a conversation. So I was responding, why I supported it, and then he would respond with a talking point he'd heard on a radio show. And then I responded, anyway, I have been called a rhino a lot. Okay. So he didn't call me a rhino, but he called Democrats dinos, Democrat in name only. And it kind of set me off. Like, I was super irritated. And I have to say, maybe it wasn't my proudest moment, but I said, well, I just need you to know that I despise name calling. So if we can move past that, I can continue the conversation. And the text ended, and he's actually a better friend of my husband's. They were work partners for a long time. And ever since then, we haven't really connected. And I was like, is this my fault? Is this his fault? And I was recently sharing this story with my son-in-law. And he said, because it's kind of bothered me. I mean, the whole conversation has kind of bothered me. And just to make the point that I am not perfect. I'm not an expert in civility, but it is something I continually try to work on. So anyway, I was sharing this story with my son-in-law, and he said, I think it probably bothered him because you were shaming him. And I had honestly not thought of that, right? I felt like I was defending my friend. And I said, oh, it had literally never occurred to me, right? That I had shamed him in that comment because I was setting him straight. And so I've thought about that a lot. I mean, that happened a year ago. So a year later, I was talking to my son-in-law, and he made that comment, and I thought it was pretty profound. So I think as we think about the different situations, even in that situation, it was easy for me to blame him, where I still played a role in that conversation. And I probably could have handled it differently. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of bring it down to a personal level, because we all have those kinds of interactions, and how we handle that, it really does matter. So I'm still learning too.
That's a great segue to our next question, Chanel. And Brian, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot just because of the nature of the work I know that you do at Flourish Foundation. But the question is, trust feels fragile across politics, education, media, and civic life. What builds trust and what breaks it from your perspective?
What builds trust?
Chanel just gave a great example, right? Of she broke trust, but she didn't even realize it. It wasn't intentional, but the impact was the same nonetheless.
Yeah. When I think of trust, and I think of what builds trust, and I just think of, again, my own personal experience, especially if I don't know people, is the experience of vulnerability, where people are willing to share. And, I think of that experience of like the vulnerability of like, gosh, maybe I made a mistake, and, I could potentially reach out to this person or share my own remorse or my own regret. And of course, it's vulnerable because we don't know how it's going to be received. The person might very easily say, yeah, it just proves that you're a bad person or whatever, just reinforces what I already thought about you. But I think just even more commonplace vulnerability in like the supermarket. I'm kind of moving away now from politics, but to just our everyday interactions in the grocery store. And I think that often, due to just social constraints and conformity of how we think we're supposed to show up, that often, I know for myself in the grocery store, if I see someone, I could be having the worst day ever. And the person could say, hey, Ryan, how are you doing? And I can say, great. Or if I don't opt for that, because I know I'm going to be accepted that way, I could also say, oh gosh, I've been so busy lately. And so there's either this, like the safety is, I can always be great, or I can always be busy. But something that always leaves me with a deep sense of connection when I'm interacting with someone is when someone is really honest and they share, like, from their hearts, in the sense of like, how's it going? Well, it's really hard right now at home. I've been really struggling with my 16-year-old son. And there's a lot of, hopefully it's not being recorded. Just speaking to the truth, the grittiness of our human experience naturally invokes empathy from another person. And then a connection is formed on that vulnerability. And there's trust that I'm willing to share a part of myself with you. And I think that's a really powerful way that I found personally to build trust, we do a lot of activities with people where it's not so much, on the surface level, but really looking at like what's alive right now in your heart and asking these deeper questions where we can start to understand each other better. And I think once that trust is formed, then naturally our shared intentions can come together. But I really think there's great power in vulnerability, and it's called vulnerability because it's scary to open ourselves up in that way, to show the parts where we feel tender and we aren't certain where we're going to be received. But over and over again, I find when I speak from the truth of what's really happening in my heart, then a deeper connection and trust forms from that place.
I think that's lovely, Ryan. And I would say, Chanel, you showed vulnerability even to have that conversation with your son-in-law, to open up to the possibility of what was my role in this situation and actually take it seriously, right? That takes vulnerability even with yourself to say, hey, I'm sad about the loss of this relationship and what could be something I don't see about it. And I love that, Ryan, in the sense of, Elle, your story about Dangs and the line. Like, for most of us, I'd say, it's probably part of why you came here. We have that experience normally on a daily basis here in this valley, or we have in the past. When you're on a trail, it doesn't have to be the bike trail, the river trail. It could be hiking, it could be anywhere. You greet each other and say good morning. And I did an experiment this last summer. Sorry, it was on the bike path, Mark. I rode from Ketchum to Haley, and I said good morning to every single person that I passed. I was 0 for 11 of responses back. Oh my gosh. And then I got a little angry back to the you're going here. Like, that's so wrong of them. And so I started saying it louder. Hello, good morning. That's not really me, frankly, right? And then I realized, that's why somebody created that Be Sunny campaign, because it isn't just me and it isn't just us, right? If we lose the part that we trust, that when we speak to someone else at the grocery store or on the trail, that they're going to respond in a positive way, then I think we've lost something very important in the fabric of our valley, where we have stopped seeing each other's humanity, to use the word you said before, Ryan, of, hey, I did an experiment once, not here in this valley, but in LA, where I practiced for a week when someone asked me how I was, saying the truth. It was really hard for me to do, but what was most astonishing was people's responses. People didn't know what to do with that. Like, they're so conditioned, back to what you were sharing before, Ryan, of like, oh, these are just the safe words we respond, right? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm busy. If you start actually saying the truth, people literally look at you like, what? Did you just say you were depressed? Like, I didn't say that. That's not the answer. That's a gift. But it's the truth. And I think in our seeking connection, that's where we need to get back to, right? Is that vulnerability to say, you know what? I'm not okay today. And my experience with people in this valley is someone would say, you know, Pam, I see you. Is there anything I can do to help you? Right? That is our community, I believe, and where we want to be. But I'll move along. I digress. Well, it's a good transition. Anyone else want to talk about trust here? Oh,
Just really quick.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, I just wanted to add also to the waving when everyone's driving. I think something regarding trust in this valley that we've kind of lost is also speaking from the high school standpoint. Yes, if many of you see us teenagers are driving out, we're probably gonna not have a great connotation. Probably gonna be like, oh, they're driving too fast, which admittedly probably sometimes we are. But the smiles have been lacking. And it's just kind of every time, like I'm kind of nervous, I kind of go with the half smile, see if someone's gonna smile back. And I think just reincorporating that into our society and everywhere we go, it's just something so little that genuinely makes such a difference and reestablishes trust that it's so easy to do. So I really encourage everyone to.
Let's say a quick thing.
sure.
Something around your head. Elle, you're not the only one in your family that drives fast, by the way.
Yeah.
Traffic is terrible. My wife wrote an essay a while back just to illuminate this point a little longer, because I think it's important, this whole trust building and how we perceive ourselves in this community. I think she wrote it, I should know this, I think she wrote it for High Country News. It's been 10, 12 years ago. And she hikes up on Carbonate frequently, like a lot of people do. And it struck her that she would say hi to, she's kind of like, she's the, what do we call it, the violently happy person in the family. She'll say to people, hi, and how's it going? And, you know, she'll like engage people. And she noticed that people were saying, oh, just another day in paradise, just another day in paradise. And it struck her that it's not paradise. It's not. And that's great that we all feel that way, but I think it's important kind of, Brian, some of what you were saying, and then you said also kind of made me think about this essay that she wrote. Like this remembering that it's fine to say that, but it's also fine to recognize, like if somebody's not okay, that's okay too. Like we're scared to actually say what we truly feel because we're afraid of what that connotates about us. And I think it's okay to actually say, like, I'm struggling or I'm having a hard day. And sometimes people say that to me, like, I'm sorry. I'll see you later. Hope it gets better. Because I can't really do anything for them. I can still be nice to them. But it's okay to also hear it. And I think we got to allow ourselves a little bit. Like, it's just not always another day in paradise. It's a nice place to live. It's great. I like all you people. I don't know you. I'm sure you're all nice. But, you know, maybe you're all struggling today. You just happen to show up. I think it's important that we remember that. Just to go a little further than what you said. And I wish I could remember that essay in what year, but you can look it up in High Country. It's a really good essay. Just love from that.
I just wanted to follow up because it was alluded to and I want to really reaffirm it, but be a good listener. There's so little good listening happening out there. People want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to assert their position, and it's hard sometimes when you're standing with somebody who doesn't think anything like you and you're trying to be a good listener and not be reactive. And if you don't have to, I mean, if they're personally coming out attacking you and abusing you, you have a right to defend yourself. But if they just want to be heard and you have the space to be able to hear them, sometimes without saying anything, you can bring so much comfort to that speaker. Oftentimes when you're in a public forum and somebody walks up to you and they want to tell you what it is that's going on with them, or they're excited about something, or they want to show their position on something, and you may not have a point of reference on it, or you may have a very strong feeling about that. Sometimes just saying nothing. I've sat there and listened to somebody for quite some time, and then they look at me and go, "Oh my God, I didn't think that we'd be in agreement on all this stuff." And they slap me on the back, and they'd be as happy as clams, and they'd walk away, and I'd have answered. But all they wanted to do is be heard, and I think that can be so helpful in building trust for people and just allowing them to feel like they're part of the community and I'm not isolated or ignored.
We've talked a lot about what's wrong, and I want to talk about what's right. There's nothing like a good crisis to bring this community together. It is at its best when we've got fire raining down on top of our heads. I was one of the people who had to evacuate their house during the first major wildfire here. My neighbors, my friends, my coworkers helped me get out of my house while the fire was bearing down from the ridges up above and raining ash on my wooden deck. And I've seen it in other crises as well. I saw it when local government and nonprofits housed immigrants who had been brought here under false pretenses and were facing homelessness and freezing temperatures. And this community gathered together to make sure that that didn't happen. This community, through its public officials, spent money that was not originally budgeted to help house unhoused people. And I've seen that over and over again. So I think the people that are maybe not experiencing that we feel like we kind of have to civilize, maybe they just need to go through a crisis with us to find out, what their to find their real selves.
I think that's, again, a perfect segue. I love this panel. To our last question, which is, if Blaine County wanted to become a national model for civic dialogue and civility, what are 1 to 2 actions we could take on to make a difference, truly make a difference? Anyone in any order can answer. you know?
So I think, we've touched on the importance of showing up for people and listening. And I really think showing up is one of the best things we can do. And one of the ways that we can show up and build our communities is to do service. And I was thinking about this on my way over here, that when you have, and sometimes depending on your circles, it can be difficult to find service, right? That can be a challenge. But I guarantee there's always some service that's needed, and it benefits the people who are doing the service, it benefits the people who are receiving it. And I have seen relationships be built through service in ways that I don't think they ever could have been. And so I would say that's one thing that can really, and can I just mention?
Sure.
So I had a barbecue at my house at the end of September, and the whole point of it was to bring people together and to talk about civility and showing up for your neighbor. Because typically, if a neighbor is in need, I don't think most people would say, well, what political party are you from? Or, well, let me just, who did you vote for? Or they wouldn't ask those type of questions, right? If someone's in need, you just help your neighbor. And anyway, so we talked about this at the barbecue, and I had invited people that I knew were from all different political persuasions. Well, almost all, I guess. But a broad range of political persuasions. I did not invite the guy to beat me. But anyway, so we had this barbecue, and I had a Democrat and a Republican legislator come and talk, and it was amazing. And they talked about showing up for your neighbors and what does that look like. And anyway, so I had T-shirts made up for the people that came to the barbecue, and then I also I had stickers designed, and we just gave them to people. So if they wanted a T-shirt, they could take a T-shirt, and I had these stickers that they could take to put on their water bottle or their computer. So I brought extras, some of the extras that I had, I brought them today. And my favorite one says, chicken wings are greater than political wings. And then we have one that says, grilling up hope for Idaho. And anyway, it was just to encourage the people that were there to kind of pay that forward, right? Figure out something that they could do to improve the civility in their neighborhood, in their family, in their community. And so anyway, I brought some for you. So when we're all done today, I will set them out here, and you're welcome to take as many as you want.
Okay, so idea number 1, host a barbecue. Idea number 2, create 50 stickers and give them away to your neighbors. I like it. What other ideas we have with Lake County?
I think of, go back thousands of years to some perennial wisdom from Lao Tzu, who said something along the likes of, watch your mind because your thoughts become your words. Watch your words because your words become your actions. And your actions impact your family, and your family impacts the community, and the community impacts the world. So I think it's really a matter of starting with ourselves and on a moment-to-moment basis, because as we said, we can be swept away in a moment of reactivity. And I guess I'll stay in this domain of Chinese wisdom of Confucius, that one moment of anger can lead to 100 years of sorrow. You can say, a moment of rage, something we didn't need, that could sever a relationship, maybe the rest of our lives. And I think we've all experienced that. And I think a really poignant example for me in terms of watching this play out in a very difficult situation is Nelson Mandela. And many of you may know this story, but his prison guard, when he was wrongfully put into prison during the apartheid in South Africa, he was tortured and really treated with incredible injustice. And what he started to realize is that his own mind was succumbing to resentment. And he would notice his captor would go home. And so he famously said, holding resentment is like drinking poison, waiting for your enemy to die. And when he recognized that, he internalized that truth for himself. He really made a strong conviction in his mind to cultivate kindness. And he ran this experiment for many years. And every time his prison guard would show up, even though his whole job was to make his life miserable, that began to erode the kind of like malicious way he was treating Mandela. And they actually became friends years later. Many of you may know how the story ends. I think it's so inspiring. That when he was inaugurated, there was just a few people in his close circle, and that prison guard was there during his inauguration as they had become friends. So I really think it's an inside job that we have to start with ourselves. And I think if we continue pointing the finger out, we always need to remember that there's three fingers pointing back to us as well, and start in our own heart and mind and go from there.
I love that. Michelle?
I wanted to flesh out a little bit what Pam said, because I think it's so important, because it is our roots. Unfortunately, you're right, there was crises that happened. But I was with the incident command for both of the fires that happened in 06 and 2013, I think it was. And we had two only female incident commanders in the country that were leaders on that. And they had combined time, because they both retired right after our fires of that season anyway, of like decades and decades of fighting fires. And of course, they're tough women because they were in a very dominant male field and managing a bunch of men and for these fires. And they were loved like mamas. They were great people. But what we noticed, to Pam's point, was not only our ability to coalesce and help all our neighbors, but every time they asked us to do something, because the way we were able to set it up, if you know, the Forest Service would take the lead, and then it would be our local firefighters that would do structure protection, and there was somebody else who was protecting you on the road, and then it was somebody else who was delegated to get you safely up and down the one road that got you in and out. That takes a kind of level of coordination without ego. Somebody's got to be in charge. And we did it so gracefully both times and with so much efficiency that we hardly even used our shelters that we set up for the Red Cross shelters. I mean, they were brought in, animals were moved, people were moved, and they were astonished that a community could do that, because there had never been another fire anywhere they had worked they'd ever seen. And I think we should be commended that we're the kind of community that can set that kind of example. I mean, they wanted to take that to other places when they had other fires and say, that community has got it down. And I need to tell you, this works. And could you please just work with us and be cooperative, because it is in the best interest and safety of everybody. But I have to say, we were an outlier, and it was remarkable. And really, they believe that every fire has an energy. And they named them. The last one was the Beast. They've never seen fire behavior like that ever. Since then, there's been a lot of really extraordinary fire behavior because of the heat and so on. Never seen that. And they called it the Beast. And they were convinced, because of this community's love, that beast died down, because it wasn't supposed to. So it's, you know, sending good vibes, sending good energy. But also, we did that one last time in COVID. We talked about something that altered us. And do you remember that at 6 o'clock we held to let our first responders know that they are seen and heard, and thank you. And then we go find our people in our communities and in our neighborhoods who were isolated and alone, to make sure that something didn't happen to them. I mean, we have that in our DNA.
I love that, Michelle, reminding us of who we are, right? And I think, Ryan, your words about the power of kindness and sharing that story of Nelson Mandela and the true power of kindness. Because I think if you look at the social milieu, there's a growing denigration of kindness and love, of that weakness. And that's not how you survive, if you will, back to that fear mantra. And the power of, in some of the most difficult circumstances ever for Nelson Mandela, to remember who he was and what was important how he wanted to live his life, and then see that on a community level in our own, right? Of kindness and service, as you mentioned, Chanel, of small plug here. If anyone wants, as a female, wants to join the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, it's volunteer only, and there's plenty of opportunity to serve. But yeah, again, part of this goal of this session was to remind us of who we are, and I believe that is who we are still to this day. We don't need a crisis. We can still be that way every day. Okay?
To Ryan's point about cultivating kindness, Gene Pichitali was one of the fire commanders who led that fight. And when I interviewed her after that, I asked her how she got involved in the fire service. And she said that when she was a little girl, her parents worked for the Forest Service, and they often worked on stands where they were thinning trees. And as they were going ahead of her, they would take her to work with them, and they would go ahead with her, and they would be pulling up trees, cutting trees, and she would be following them, taking the smallest trees and putting them back in the ground to cut them. And I asked her, I said, so you became a firefighter to save trees? And she said, I think I did.
So we are, of course, running out of time, but I do want to leave time for audience questions. But I have a specific question for the younger members of our panel. What gives you hope, Ellen Sankey, about your generation's approach to dialogue and that things can be different going forward?
Or a little story to tell. I'm not very good at tennis. I tried out for the tennis team last year, and I did not make varsity. And the thing about JV tennis is that you have to get there at 6:30 in the morning for practice. I actually think it was early. Sure. And I remember the first day I was super bummed out. I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible. And I got there, and my other friend, who is the same age as me, who also did not make the team, had a huge smile on his face when he walked in. And I don't know, that kindness, or I guess that positivity kind of rubbed off on me. And I think my point here is that I think in my generation, there's a lot of not niceness, there's a lot of anger. But my point here is that I think it only takes one person to kind of set off like a chain of positivity among a group of people. So.
My own for hope, I think one, hope is the greatest thing that we have, and we must hold on to it, otherwise we will not make any change. For me, and hope in my generation, my future, is I have had these deep and meaningful conversations, and I've done it with a lot of my other like classmates and people, and I see that while a lot of what we've said earlier has been when you see someone and you ask them how they are, and we're not oftentimes genuine and we're not vulnerable. I believe in my generation, I think we've learned to talk about our feelings a lot more. We've learned to be more open and more considerate of genuinely how we are doing. And there's through programs like Compassionate Leaders and so many other amazing like programs and companies that we have in this valley that we're so thankful for, that we're able to talk and open the conversation. And it's like things like this, like having teen representation like me and Santi, it's such a good thing, and it gives me hope for the future. Because we are sitting here, we are having these conversations actively right now. And that really just does bring so much hope. And I just joined.
Thank you, Santi and Elle. So we have just a few moments. Are there questions from the audience that you think can add to the subject that we're talking tonight? Yes. I'll repeat the question for the mics. Go ahead.
All right. I'll project my voice here.
Perfect.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. A double-barreled question, Mr. Rico, Mr. Redmond. Mr. Redmond, you talk about vulnerability. And my opinion is that we become uncivil when we make assumptions about people. Social media makes us compressed, and so we don't want to take the time to get past our assumptions. So I want to ask Mr. Rico first. What is it about you and your friends that you wish Mr. Redmond's generation knew about you? And conversely, Mr. Goodman, what would you like to know, them to know about your generation? Thank you.
I think specifically for anyone who here that may live nearby the school area, we're not that bad at driving. We're not like purposely like going fast to like piss you guys off. And I think a lot of like things that like are, I think it's like indicative of like a lot of things that our generation might do might make you guys mad, some of which understandably. But I think hopefully for the most part, it's not ill-mannered.
Good answer, right?
Great questions. Yeah. I don't know if this pertains to our generation, but just to all of us together, that we're all in it together. You know, just continuing to remind ourselves of that. And I think, you know, often I know being a parent, kind of the strongest parenting moments that I've had, going back to Chanel's point, is not that I've been like the perfect archetypal ideal parent, but we're still growing and we're evolving as well as human beings. So we're all evolving alongside one another. And it's happening kind of mutual interdependence, if you will, in terms of us being with young people being with us. And to the, you know, the most powerful moments that I've had as a parent, actually doing what I do when I repair a situation. And just remembering that, you know, we're not perfect, and yeah, we're still growing alongside of you. And I hope we can grow together.
Great question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I got a question. There's something I want to, I wish I could have copies of this and pass it out to everybody.
Well, we're gonna hold for that to be our right time, but we do want to share it. We can share it with the Wood River Women's Foundation. We do have a page on our website that you can come and see activities throughout the valley for the year that are on this topic of civil discourse that will be recommended reading. If people want to post things, we will collect that. And as long as it's in line with this topic, we continue to house that for our community and to foster these kinds of dialogue. So if there is a quick question, because we are at time for the panelists, further talk.
A quick question.
Yes.
Currently, how, and this is open to anybody that can answer it, how do you keep your civility when it's an issue of morals and not opinion?
So the question for those on Zoom is, how do you keep your civility when it's a question of morals
And not opinion.
and not opinion? Anyone? Mark?
Why can I answer this question, Tommy?
Civility, people remember ground rules.
I like his wife better. So this is an interesting question because I hesitate to bring it up, but I'm dealing with something right now. I'm not dealing with it. One of our staff people are dealing with it, but we're going to have to deal with it. And it is, I think it's a moral question. One of our staff people, who's Peruvian, got approached by somebody and was asked why you're still here. We haven't quite addressed it yet. It happened just today, I guess. It's funny you asked this question, Tommy, because I've been thinking about it all day, because my initial reaction was not great. It's probably still not great. I'm open to suggestions. Sorry, I'm having a hard time answering, but I did want to bring it up because I thought it's apropos to the question, because it's very raw. The person who experienced it is very raw for that person. It's a woman. She wanted to confront it herself, We want to support her in confronting that. We want to make that individual know that that's unacceptable, that you can't be here if you're going to act like that. We do have, it's not civil rules, but we have like code of conduct rules. You can't treat people like that. She has a right to be here just as much as you do. And we're going to handle it by confronting it, talking through it, and we're going to all have to try to contain ourselves as to how that's going to play out. And I don't know what we're going to get back, because I kind of know who the individual is, and that individual might be confrontational. If it gets confrontational, it's kind of like the conversation's over. There isn't a conversation, because it goes back to, I think, did you say this? You can't negotiate with somebody you can't negotiate with? Yeah, and that we're not going to negotiate, but we're going to be civil while we do it.
One of the questions we didn't get to this evening was that civility requires both courage and empathy. And I think this example, right, that you're sharing, Mark, is one of those. It's not easy. It's easy to be civil when you're in agreement. It's way more difficult. I think the experiences of Michelle and Chanel and Pam. So Pam, when I first met her, asked me, why did I approach her about being on this panel? And I said, I read the miscellaneous 2 column every week, and surely you have seen a lot from that perspective, right? And I think all of us have, and I think that is the whole point of this. So can we be in the practice, to use your words, Ryan and Elle, of finding that place within ourselves of vulnerability, of kindness, of rising to it, especially in the face when it is confrontation and it is difficult. And I think it's not easy. And I think it's something for all of us to talk about. And back to what did we hear from Michelle and Pam on this subject? We all have a responsibility to hold structure for each other, right? To not tolerate uncivil behavior from someone who we politically might agree with, but is acting in a way that is, mean or unkind or disrespectful to somebody else. And can you, Mark, in that situation, right, hold structure to say, this is unacceptable, this is where the line is, this is what our code of conduct says. I'm sorry you are going through this, but that is what we need to do for each other in our community, both in official organizations as well as just out and about on the bike path. Yeah. Saying, hey, that's not a safe behavior. Can you slow down, please? Because our children are trying to play here. And in a way that someone can hear, feel respected, and be a neighbor or host a barbecue. Michelle, yes.
I just wanted to follow up that it is the responsibility of a person who's in a position, heading an organization, being a leader, that you do protect your people. And that you do make people follow the rules and behave themselves, because if it escalates out of control, you have no control. You see this happening everywhere. It's up to us to make sure that we set that example. And so I know that we can come from this empathetically as best as we can, but when we have somebody who is insistent on bullying or misbehaving or asserting their anger on us, we have every right to calmly tell them that their anger and their hate is theirs to own and not yours. And you put your hand up and you say, and until you can be civil and have some manners, we're not having this discussion, and you walk away. They don't deserve to have your energy. You don't give it to them. Just don't give it to them. And I think we have to really stand up for ourselves and stop being conflict averse in a situation where where we're having less and less civility, less and less manners. People think they have a right to impose all of this negative energy on us. We don't need to own that. That's theirs. But the only way we can make sure to check them on that is to tell them, sorry, so you can be civil. We're not having this discussion. And you don't need to be angry about it. You just walk away from it. But you let them know, because it needs to be said.
Words of wisdom from Michelle.
And
Pam, finish us off. We are at time.
And if you happen to feel guilty about that, and if you happen to feel that somehow you are not expressing kindness, consider probably the only words of the Dalai Lama that I remember from when he was here. A man of peace, you probably all agree. And someone asked him, what about war? What do you believe that no one should fight ever? And he paused and he said, after quite a long pause, he said, I do believe that the Second World War saved civilization, and sometimes you must stand against the wind.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And thank you, audience, for coming. We have run out of time, but for women in the audience or men who have women at home who are not in the audience, we are welcoming new members always to Wood River Women's Foundation. It's a great way to get involved and serve your community. Please visit our website if you want to keep track of other activities in the Valley that relate to this topic. And if you are running an organization or have an event that you think would relate to this topic, let us know. We'll be glad to post it on our calendar. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope this does give you plenty of things to think about, to act about, and to give you hope, because I do have hope for our Valley. And that's because of all of you and how we show up for each other. So thank you, panelists. Big round of applause for our panelists.